Welcome, my friend. I love your book.
I'm
You
so
know,
excited to be here.
I, I, it's really weird for me, and you probably are the same. You know, a lot of people who have written books, and I'll just, my book is making me, your book is making me look blue with my lighting. We know a lot of people who have written books, and sometimes
Mhm.
people give you books, and you're like, oh, thank you. And then
Yeah,
you open and you start to read and you're like, ah, this isn't really for me. And
yeah.
I got your book and I wasn't sure what to expect. And I started to read it and I could not put the book down. And I actually received the book before you mailed me the beautiful gift bundle. And I think I was halfway through the book. And then I got the gift bundle. And then I fangirled because I've been telling clients for years that they need to do exactly what you did with your gift bundles. So I shared pictures in the community, but the packaging, the intention behind the way that your book showed up, it was all so on purpose. I loved it, loved it, loved it,
Thank
loved it. So,
you. I mean, I like to say that I eat what I cook. I don't just talk about living on purpose or living a life that's aligned or being intentional in your everyday life. I actively try to model that in my own life. So it's not a bunch of theory or it's not, I think a lot of times you meet people and you're like, I don't know if they're really living the way that they're talking. I really try to live my message. So that's really important to me. So thank you
yeah.
for saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have stories I could tell about authors that I literally worshiped and then I met in person and they totally did not live the way they wrote. And it was horrifying to find out that
Hmm.
this person who writes about leadership and all this is completely not that way. So
Yeah.
it's great. So I have a bunch of questions for you, and some of the questions are related to the book, and some of them are related to writing because I kind of have a crush
Okay.
on how you wrote your book. So the first question that I want to talk to you about is, you talk about the cathedral, and you talk about
Hmm.
really thinking about where you're headed. And so I want to know if you have ever found yourself stuck when it comes to imagining what you want the future to be.
Hmm.
And if you have found yourself in that moment where you can't quite see beyond, what you did about it. Because I can tell you that in my life and my career, I feel like I've had those cathedral visions. And
Yeah.
then I'm going to say I've had holy shit moments where I arrived at the cathedral and now I'm like, oh, I'm living in the cathedral. Well, now what? And it almost feels like, who are you to dream bigger than this? So I'm wondering if
Hmm.
you have ever had that happen and how you actually get yourself to pick the next cathedral.
Yeah. Have I had a holy shit moment? Is that your question? Yeah.
But that too.
Yeah, I mean, we all have moments like that. And I think this is the big thing is, even when, as I just said, like I live my life really aligned with what I speak about, it doesn't mean that I don't struggle with any of these things because I'm still a person at the end of the day. In fact, somebody asked me in one of the interviews that I did, they said, what's the hardest piece of advice that you give to take for yourself? And it's this whole idea of narrowing. That for me is one of the most difficult things because I have 75 ideas and every one of those ideas only has like 32 variations, so I'm only looking at 2 million options. Right. And so you've met my husband John before, Lisa, I think. What I say is, part of John's job is just over on the side to do this. He's like, narrow, narrow. Like, not every idea that I have is great, and not every idea should I go after, right? I'm a visionary, so I have a lot of ideas, but it's sometimes really hard to narrow in. So I get to a point where I'm like, "Ooh, I don't know what the cathedral looks like next." Or I've also had times where I've accomplished something big, and I'm like, "Is that really still my cathedral? And if it's not, what is it?" And I think that's when, and this is not a concept I talk about in the book, but it's something that's kind of been evolving as I've been talking about the book, is that I really believe we all have this backpack on our back, right? And it's on our back so we don't see it. And what happens is we go through life and we're gathering up knowledge and expertise, and we gather up experiences and things that don't go well that we've learned lessons from. And all these things are going into this backpack throughout our whole life. And it's on our back and it weighs a lot, but because it's on our back, we forget about it. It's so important to take that backpack off, to like plop it down in front of you, unzip it, and unpack everything in your backpack and really take a good look at it. And I think what happens is, first thing is you're like, oh my God, how much stuff was I carrying in that backpack? We're first of all shocked at how much we know and really the experts that we've become. We tend to discount ourselves as experts. We talk about that in the book. But when we take out the backpack, we start to see themes and patterns. And when you really spread it out, all this crap out of your backpack, right? You start to see, oh, there's like a theme here or a pattern that I'm noticing. And that can help give you that alignment and that motivation to be like, oh, okay, I think the next step for my cathedral or the next cathedral I have is tied to this. And that's certainly something that I did when I closed up my first business. I started my first business in 2008, closed it up in 2013 to open up Inkwell Press. And when I made the decision to close it up, I literally said to John, I love you. I love working with you. He's my CMO. But I don't love what we're doing. And he's like, okay, what do you want to do? And I was like, oh, I have no idea. I'm like, what if this is it? What if there is nothing else out there? And that's part of what I had to do was take off the backpack, start, really looking at things. And that's how the patterns began to emerge that pushed me to start Inkwell Press Productivity Co.
Interesting. And so when you look at those patterns, you're basically looking for what? You're looking for clues, things that are, that align, that are helping you to see where you should go next. Is that what you're looking for?
I started looking for, when I've done this exercise in the past, what I do is I just start like mapping it out. And then I start to notice like these things kind of group together. And then I'll put things out on sheets of paper. I'm really big because I think writing really triggers your brain differently. Your reticular activating system is triggered by writing. I'll write it out on a bunch of Post-it notes or index cards, and I'll just start like putting them into piles. And I'll say like, these are somehow related and this is related. And then I start having these piles and I start asking myself like, what is it in this pile? What is it that I love about these things, right? I start looking for, how do I feel? I feel like so often too, we get really caught up in just the metrics of things. And it's time to also lean into our intuition, lean into our knowing, lean into how do I feel emotionally about these things? And I think emotions is one of those topics that's starting to be talked about, but for a long time, it was kind of swept under the rug. Like, we don't want to be emotional, especially as women, like we don't be emotional. And really your emotions, that gut instinct we have is so important to tie into, to know how you want to run your business, how you want to lead people on your team, and start really paying attention to your emotions that you experience as you're going through each of those little piles that you have. And you'll have a pile that's small and you'll have piles that are giant. And you can start to really ask yourself those questions to dive into it a little bit deeper. You can even do that 5th why exercise, right? To kind of get into why do I love this? And then asking why again and asking why again. I think that 5th why, it works for so many different situations. I literally have used it to dive into what I'm truly grateful for. Because I think really often with our gratitude, we go very surface level. To really dive into what I'm grateful for, I've used it for figuring out bottlenecks in my system. So I've used it for productivity and my operations of my business. I've used it with team members. I've used it in 1,000 different ways with my kids to help them break through. So really diving into that why is incredibly powerful.
For sure. I love the idea of the cards or the Post-its, because I feel like when you're writing in a notebook and you're writing pages and pages and pages, it's not so easy to sort. And, when I started the strategy lab earlier this year, one of the things that I did is I wrote down all my ideas on Post-it notes, and I did the same thing. I cleared off my desk and I started mapping things together and chunking things together to help me organize my own thoughts. But I don't think I do that often enough. So that's a really great reminder to, pull out those cue cards and do it that way.
It really is powerful when you see things grouped together. It allows you to go deeper into it. And to be honest with you, that's one of the first things I do when I'm writing a book is I have, again, 75 billion ideas, right? So I will list them all out and then I cut them out. I use scissors because these I type, because that way I can move things around later on. I will cut them out with scissors, and I have pictures of myself doing this because I was like, John, we got to take a picture because this looks like I'm a crazy woman. But I just start putting them into groups, and that's how I decide, oh, this is what I want to write about. For this is going to be a chapter on this, and this is going to be a chapter on that, right? Whether the stories or the scientific proof that I have, all of that that's related, starts to become these little piles. And eventually I had like 9 piles for 9 chapters.
Yeah, so smart. You're so organized and methodical in your thinking. So I love the pony story, of course. Is it a pony or is it a pile of you know what? And so my question is, you have a lot of really great stories and metaphors in the book. How do you keep them all top of mind? How do you remember the cathedral, the pony, the fifth why? Like, you've got all these great little sayings. And so if I've read your book and I love some of the stuff that you've talked about, it's do you have a practice for keeping some of those things top of mind?
Yeah, like in the book, so that it stays top of mind, you'll notice what I do, everything that I create, everything that I do, whether it's a podcast season or a book or even a blog post, I look at it as curriculum because I used to be a teacher, right? And so I look at it as curriculum in that we have a starting point where we have the reader or the person who's taking in this information, and we have an end point of where I want to take them. And so I very intentionally kind of map things out, and I have callbacks where I will, we talk about finding the pony in, I think, chapter 1, and you'll notice I'll talk about, this is the manure. I felt like this was the manure, right? So it's a callback. And so I do that really intentionally so that it's not a one and done situation where it's like one time we talk about it in the book. That way it's always kind of bubbling through and it becomes this thread that's going throughout the entire book. And that's one of the ways that I make it so that the readers don't forget about that concept and it becomes top of the mind. For me, organizing and keeping all those, I'm trying to think if I have like a system for myself where I keep all of those organized, but I don't, to be honest with you. They're just things that I say again and again. And again, this is kind of one of those things my team is always like, we need to just walk around with a recorder behind you. Cause I'll say things, and then they'll be like, that's really good. You need to say that in a podcast episode. So I'll write it down in my podcast brainstorm. Like I want to bring it back up, but I don't really have a method to make sure that I'm always doing that. But when I'm mapping out the book, I'm very intentional to say, like, I don't want to have too many sayings in one chapter, or I don't, right? So I want to map it out. Or even with things like the 3 A's that we talk about in chapter 9, I want to make sure that I'm doing something that's memorable. So everything starts with an A, right? Or the impact framework. I make sure that it makes sense. So every letter stands for IMPACT.
Right. So what are you looking at? You have something you're looking at. So do you have like a cheat sheet that you use for interviews that helps you to recall stuff in your own work? Or are you just looking away thinking?
I'm just looking away thinking.
Okay. Okay. I thought maybe you were like because you look down and you're talking. And so I know some people look away. I have a habit of doing that too when I'm thinking, but I wasn't sure if you actually were so organized that you had a prep list of concepts that you talk about when you're interviewing.
I will be honest. I do have a prep list. It's over here I'll show it to you. It's like up at eye height, so I don't have to look away. Probably can't see it but it reminds me of what each chapter title is. It reminds me of like some of the certain things that I say, but I don't really need it.
Right.
I mean, I have, first of all, having written the book and then edited it, meaning I reread my book every time I do edits. So I reread the book from beginning to end. And we did 8 or 9 rounds of edits. So I've reread the entire book 8 or 9 times since writing it the first time. I'm like, I know these concepts.
8 or
but yeah,
9
I do have a cheat sheet that
Wow.
I use, probably on the front end of like getting into the podcast season of, when you're promoting a book and everything else. But I haven't really looked at it since. But it does have things like if somebody asks me, because a lot of people will do like speed round questions.
Yeah.
So I have some typical speed round question responses, because that's not something that's just automatically here. Like, who do I want to have dinner with? If I could choose anyone in the world to have dinner with, I have that written down, or my favorite quote, or those kinds of things.
Gotcha. So let's talk about rules. I thought it was fascinating when you talked about women and our tendency to follow the rules, because when we're little girls, we get praised for being rule followers. And it's funny, I read that part of your book and I was out for a walk that morning after reading it. And I found myself rushing to finish up my walk to get back because I needed to shower because I needed to be in my office by 9 a.m. And then I caught myself questioning who made the rule that says I, as the business owner, have to be in my office at 9 a.m. if I don't have a call scheduled at 9 a.m. So it really made me start to think about some of the things that I do because I have kind of adapted to societal rules. So, talk to me a little bit about rules that you have noticed that you've bought into, maybe a rule that you had to unrule. You had to, you had to break up with that rule and how you approach that.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is, I got into business because I didn't want to live by anyone else's rules. And then suddenly I found myself living by other people's rules, right? You have to be in the office at 9 o'clock, or you have to, all these different things.
Your inbox
and they become
by the end of the day. And
yes, I mean, all these things that we tell ourselves that we have to do, who's telling us we have to do that? Who's this mystical person who's telling us, like, you have to be in the office at 9, hurry up your walk. Lisa, you might need to cut off that last, quarter mile. And it's like,
and that's what I would do. Why?
Yeah,
why? 2,000 steps.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's fascinating because we are just so primed to play by whatever these rules have become. And we're afraid to bend even our own rules. I would say, honestly, the biggest rule that I'm in the process of breaking right now is I have just made an announcement. I made the announcement a couple of weeks ago that I am no longer going to be on social media. Because I believe being on social media, that you have to be on social media is a limiting belief. I don't believe you have to be on social media to show growth, to show that you're alive, to convert clients. I don't think you have to do it. And I think that for a very, very long time, I've played by that rule, even when I don't enjoy social media, even though I don't like the algorithm, even though it doesn't align with my values, I was showing up on social media. And I made the decision, I guess, around the first part of November, that I was tired of playing by this rule. And that if I was going to show up on a platform, I needed to agree with it. And I think the whole announcement with the metaverse and all of that, I was like, I don't like this. I don't like where this is going. I didn't want to endorse it. And so I felt like showing up in a certain place is a way of endorsing it. So that's probably the biggest rule, that January 1st of 2022, I will be officially off of Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
And you're closing your accounts, or are you just going to park them?
No, I'm not closing the account, and I'm doing that really intentionally because I am going to be putting up a graphic like on Instagram and on Facebook, letting people know this is not because I just don't have an account. This is because I'm taking a stand. This is because this is who I am, and I am delineating myself from what everybody else is doing. I am purposely, and what's great is since I've come out with that podcast episode, I've had so many people emailing me. Like, I had more responses to this one podcast episode. I'm on episode like 250 at this point. This has been my biggest one. And every single one has been positive. Or people saying, I feel like I have permission not to be on social media anymore. I don't love it. I don't enjoy it. And some people do love it. Some people do enjoy it. I don't. So I'm like, why am I doing it? Right. So now I am totally pushing myself and challenging myself out of that box of, okay, how do you connect? How do you deepen relationships and create connection with your listeners, with your clients and your possible customers? How do I do that in ways that are not on social media, which I am really excited about?
That's cool. That's great. I took Facebook off my phone probably 6 months ago. And it's funny, I had an old journal that I was reading through, and I picked it up and I opened to a page. And that morning I had wrote down how I was feeling, and I was frustrated about some things in my life and my business. And I wrote about how I was sick and tired of being on Facebook, and I was spending too much time scrolling on my phone. And the entry was from 2 years earlier, and I felt the exact same way. So I realized that I needed to do something radical in order to change my pattern, my behavior pattern. And so I deleted social media, like most of them, off of my phone. And I had all of them off of my phone for quite some time, which was great. I do have Facebook back on my phone right now because something passwords changed. And in order for me to get the messenger
Mhm.
part, I had to put it back on. But I'm not in the habit of using it anymore. Like I consciously don't want to use it that way.
Mhm.
But
You know, what I did a while back when I first decided I was going to take Facebook off of my phone or in Instagram, I replaced it with a meditation app because my thumb was automatically going there and I would end up
Mhm.
opening the meditation app instead of social media. And then I'd be like, well, I'm already in here. I'll do a 5-minute meditation instead.
Right,
Mhm.
right. It's interesting because I do think that there are pros to using social media. I think
Oh,
that
yeah.
there's lots of good stuff that I have seen happen as a result of social media, but it's also become a really noisy and nasty place at times. And
Yeah.
I feel like the industry of where we congregate and connect online is changing. And
Mhm.
when I started the strategy lab earlier this year, I consciously chose not to have a Facebook group and to put it on a different platform. And I knew that it was going to be harder to get people to show up in that platform, but
Yeah.
it was very conscious because I didn't want to have to show up in Facebook. So
Yeah.
that's a tough rule to break.
It is a tough rule to break. And I think that, it's funny because it's something I've thought about for a long time. And I always felt like, but I have to be there. And then I was like, hold
Mhm.
on, who says I have to be here? And truly, when I dove into and I looked at the numbers, and this is the thing too, this is what the beauty of metrics. I looked into my numbers of who's really finding me on social media and then converting into what I consider your soulmate client or your ideal avatar, some people call it. I call it a soulmate client because it's who I absolutely love working with, who loves working with me. When I dive into those metrics, they weren't really finding me on social media. And they weren't really finding me in those ways. They were listening to me on podcasts, or it was like groups like this, right? Different ways that people were finding me. But when I realized how much time and energy and focus that I was spending on social media, it didn't correlate to the revenue. It didn't correlate to the outcomes I really wanted to create. And I think that's really important to take a good look at from time to time. There's a lot of times that we're telling ourselves, as business owners, I have to do this, or I have to have this many products, or I need to have more offerings, or I need to. And when you really dive into and using the Pareto principle is a great way to do this, that 80-20 rule. Who are the customers that are really making a difference in my bottom line? Who are the clients? What are the products? And then is there a way to minimize the time spent on the rest, or with our
Right.
products getting rid of some of the rest, right?
What about Inkwell? Will you take Inkwell Press off of Instagram as well, or just Tanya?
Definitely the Tanya Dalton brand, which always makes me feel weird with the Tanya, the Tanya Dalton brand, but definitely the Tanya Dalton brand. We're having conversations about what that can look like. I have partners and vendors and things like that. So it's not going to be as immediate, but yes, we're talking about doing that as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Because I know as a consumer of your products,
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy seeing the new things that you have coming out when I'm
Yeah.
scrolling on Instagram. So,
But what I'm
um,
going to do instead is make my newsletters more interesting. Make sure that that's a place, right? And as I own that traffic, I don't
right,
own the traffic. Even though I put stuff on Instagram that are new and exciting, it only goes out to this many people, right? If
right.
I am making my newsletters engaging and I really work on that open rate and making it so that the open rate is better, I'm going to
Mhm.
be able to go in there, deepen those connection points, deepen those relationships by giving added value. And then I can also talk about like, these are the upcoming things, or here's what's interesting. So I'm doing lots of other things with the newsletter. I'm going to be doing some live kind of gatherings where people can get together. I'm doing a social media roundtable in January to talk about what that looks like with other business owners, how, because I've had a lot of questions about it. So lots of other ways that I think that I can connect with people outside of just the little squares of social media.
Yeah. Cool. Exciting.
Yeah.
So on page 67, you say if you want to be great and do great things, you have to understand the cost of greatness is commitment. So I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you balance intentional commitment against being spontaneous and in the moment?
I like that question
Because I have a client who is very much spontaneous and, really, really loves to just be in the moment. And, if somebody says, hey, let's go do this, she wants, that's why I started a business. I have freedom to go do these things. And so I think that's great. But then, there's part of me that's a little bit, sometimes tisk, but what about this, and this? And so I'm curious as to what your perspective is on how you balance those things.
Yeah, well, I think all good planning requires flexibility. It requires the grace for life to happen. This is why buildings and bridges were made to withstand the tornado winds and the hurricane winds, and they're made to be flexible. That's what we need to do with our planning. In The Joy of Missing Out, I talk about how we create structure for our weeks while still building in that flexibility. And part of that is planning each day as a new day, not planning out on Sunday what you're doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, because what happens is Monday's fabulous. Monday is amazing. You get so much done. Tuesday happens. You wake up, you've had a sick kid crawl in your bed in the middle of the night, or you have allergies and it's just like a hot mess. Well, what happens is Tuesday's a mess. If you've already mapped out what you're doing Wednesday, well, you wake up Wednesday already behind the 8 ball because you got to make up for Tuesday and Wednesday. And then Thursday just becomes this giant snowball. Thursday, you're behind, and Friday, you're behind. If you treat each day as a new opportunity, right? I mean, this is the thing, is it's really important to take the time to choose how you want to spend your day each and every day. So you take 5 or 10 minutes to plan Tuesday on Tuesday. You spend 5 or 10 minutes to plan Wednesday on Wednesday. I go back in that book, I talk about you create like a whole purge list. So you map out kind of what you want to accomplish during the week, but you're pulling from that each day. And that allows you that grace for spontaneity to say, you know what, today I'm not working, or today I'm going for the extra quarter mile on my walk, or whatever it is. I think spontaneity is so important. When we make plans that are super rigid, it doesn't build in that fun. And this is the thing with productivity, is it's about creating spaces so that you can have fun, so you can have joy. Joy and happiness are your birthright. You don't have to earn them. You don't have to get a certain amount of work done to accomplish happiness. Happiness is there for you each and every day. So for you, really putting in blocks of time that are just like, this is an open block. This is a block where I know I'm going to do something for myself, but I don't know what it is. Do that. I think that's really important because you do want to be able to, I mean, that's why we go into business for ourselves. It's for the freedoms, time freedom, location freedom, financial freedom, right? All those freedoms. And good planning, good productivity is like the bones in your body. They don't make you run, skip, hop, or jump, but they allow you to do that you have that structure built in there, right? So it gives you that structure without confining you.
Yeah, because I mean, I build my calendar very intentionally with structure when I do coaching calls, when I have my office day, like, and all of that. Even, when I get rid of all the emails that are in my inbox at the end of each day, like I've built time in for that. But I think what I probably don't do as much as I could is build in the flex time. Because if you build in the flex time, you can move other things around and then have more space for that.
Well, if you are butting one thing after the next, you have what's called attention residue. As you're finishing one task, you still have the attention residue from the previous task as you start to do the next one. So really building in buffers in there is important, not just so you have room for the spontaneity and to shift things around, but also to do better work, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's easier said than done, though, if you have client calls as an example, because I would rather have like a 5-minute break in between my client calls than have a 15-minute break between my client calls, because I waste that 15 minutes. And I want to consolidate the calls in a shorter period of time so that I can have a bigger block of time to do other things at the end of those calls, if that makes sense.
I think client calls is different though, because that's like boom, boom, boom. You're in that state and you're almost in a state of flow because they're phone calls. So those are almost, to me, one block. Client phone calls versus a block of, working on creative copy for your product and then working on finances or working on, your metrics and diving into your metrics. Those are different things, like different parts of your brain are working. When you're doing your client phone calls, that's kind of a repetitive task that you're doing back to back to back with a
Right.
5-minute buffer in between.
Gotcha. That makes more sense. Okay. B to Y. I love it. Like that is the most clever thing I've ever heard anybody say. Like I got A to Z. It's the B to Y I don't have. Like I love,
I
love, love
mean,
that.
when she said it, I was like, hold on, what? I mean,
Yeah, I need to write that down
clearly,
for my next book.
I need to write that down. Yeah, I need to write that down. And I was like, can I get your phone number so I can talk with you? Right? Yeah.
Yeah, that was just so smart. And it's the thing that I feel like I am a lot of B to Y for my clients. I help them
Mhm.
fill in the gap between B to Y. But I find for me personally, sometimes it's harder to fill in the gap from B to Y. And it's harder for me to sometimes tell my team what B to Y should be. So my question for
Mhm.
you is, where do you go to get help with your own B to Y?
I like that question because a lot of times we can't see the forest for the trees. It's so much
Mm,
easier, like you said, like I can totally do that for anyone else. But for me, it's because you're in the middle of the forest.
mm,
So it's this idea, and I call it the forest view. It's zooming out to get that forest view. And what helps is to really surround yourself with other people who are your sounding boards, whose opinions and thoughts you value, right? And so I have people who I call regularly where it's like, okay, I want to do some strategy planning. Let's just kind of talk some things through, and I'll do some strategy. You do some strategy. I'll help them in their business. They'll help me, and we work together because you can't see the gaps a lot of times. You know,
mhm.
this is true too with people on your team because you have personal relationships with team members. And so we have these blind spots with team members, with areas of our business or passion things that we're going after that aren't really moving us forward, right? Some of those rabbit holes that we get into or these rabbit trails. So really, it helps to have sounding boards. For me, I have John, who
Mhm.
is my CMO, who also happens to be my husband. And so when I'm doing, I really very intentionally pause once a quarter at least to do my quarterly planning. And so I do a half day 4 times a year, and actually 3 times a year because the fourth time that I do it, usually in the fall, I take 2 whole days to do it. And I do it with him where I'm doing reflection, and he will challenge me. And that's really part of his role when we're getting together is, I do a reflection activity. I go through each of the areas of my business and I reflect, and he'll kind of poke holes in what I'm saying. Is that true? Or, why do you think that is? And it just helps me dive a little bit deeper. So it helps to have somebody else to really help you find the B to Y. I think
Mhm.
getting outside of yourself is incredibly important. We talk about it as being the observer, taking out your own emotional baggage, putting it to the side, easier said than done. It's kind
Mhm.
of like how your best friend can see things in you that you can't see. Like we'll see all the things we've done wrong, and your best friend will be like, those things, no, you do this right, you do that right, right? You don't look fat in those pants, they're just the wrong
Yeah.
cut for you, right?
Yeah.
We all need a sounding board. We are not designed to be on these little islands. And I think for a long time that was a mistake I made in business was I felt like I was an island, and not the fruity cocktail kind of island, which I really like. More like the Tom Hanks Castaway Island, where I'm making fire by myself, right? We're not really designed for that, and it helps to have somebody else on the island with us. We
Mhm.
all need a Wilson.
Yeah, absolutely. I was reading a book recently, and the author used a metaphor that I really liked, which was, um, you can't read the ingredients on the outside of a jar when you're the person inside the jar. And I thought that was
I like
really,
that.
you're really powerful. It's like when you're in it, you can't read what's on the outside because you're in it. And so I think it's
Yeah.
the same kind of example in your business. And I think that, the other thing that I would say when it comes to some of this is finding the courage to say no to things, right? I think that's a really
Yeah.
important part. And I think that sometimes we get drawn back into things and we get caught up in the energy of the moment. So, even this morning, I've run this program this year called My 365. And it was a program dedicated to a habit that you wanted to build every day for a year. And my habit was I wanted to get more steps in than I did the previous year, every single day of this year. And so I wanted to commit to being healthier and move more. And, a lot of people have fizzled out. They haven't stuck with what they said they were going to do,
Mhm.
but there's a bunch of us that have like stuck with it all year long. And I had a conversation with someone this morning and she said to me, so what are you going to do? Are you going to let my 365 go at the end of the year? And I said, yeah, I think so. She goes, oh, I don't think you should. I think you should make it a lot more expensive. And I think you should do this and this and this and this and this. And all of a sudden I'm like drawn in. I'm like, oh, what should I? Whereas what I really need to do is say, no,
Yeah.
not what I want to do. So it's, having that perspective to remind you of all of the groaning and complaining you've done about something throughout the year when you think it's a good idea to do it again is good.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yes. So page 156, I laughed when I read this. First of all, I love your blocks of time. I think it's just brilliant how you broke it down into, the 15-minute increments, right? I thought it was just, day one, 96 blocks of 1 day of 96 blocks of 15 minutes. I was like, that's just awesome. And then you have sleeping and doing. And you wrote, I have a feeling you'd like me to share a graphic that tells you exactly how many blocks you should spend on each activity. And I could tell you what I think are the perfect percentages that you should spend, but those are my percentages, not yours. You need to decide how you want to spend your time. After all, you own it. I don't.
Yes. Because they want me to give them like a recipe. Tell me how much time I should spend on this, that, and the other. And I'm like, oh no. Or they're like, tell me what my goals should be. Like, can you give me a list of my goals? And I'm like, I cannot give that to you. I can give you the tools to be able to discover your goals. I can help you with the B to Y. I can walk you through and we can discover those together. Absolutely. That's what I do VIP days for, is to help people uncover what your goals are and what you want to map out for your year. I can't just say to you, you know what? Let me give you a quick little PDF of here's your goals, right? Like, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
So,
but when you
same
look
thing with
at
your
the
time.
when you look at your doing time, are there not like ratios? You should have this amount of time that you worked and this amount of time that you play and this amount of time that you sleep, and no ratios?
No ratios. No, because some days I'm going to work more and some days I'm going to work less. It kind of depends on how I want to feel. What I like to do is I like to start out my day thinking about how do I want to feel at the end of the day. And that's how I choose to prioritize what's really most important to me for that day to accomplish. If, Kay has a volleyball game or something like that, then I want to make sure at 6 o'clock during her volleyball game, I'm present. That's the emotion I'm going for. If I have a presentation later this week, I want to make sure I'm prepared. Or it's not the same thing every day. I don't want to say I want to be successful. I really focus in on what will help me feel most empowered to close the work compartment behind me and open up the door to the home compartment. What's going to help me do that? How do I want to feel at the end of the day? Do I want to feel like I've moved the needle forward, or do I want to feel like I've completed something? Do I want to feel like, all of those things? And then I can map out what I want to accomplish for the day. So, like next week, I have, a couple of meetings, but there's a lot more play. I'm picking up Jack from college. He's a freshman in college this year. I'm picking him up from school on Friday. So next week I want to work less. And oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I can't wait to have him home for like 3 weeks. It's going to be amazing. But so this is the thing, is I don't want to work the same every single day. And I have the freedom not to work the same every single day. So I don't like to give ratios, because what works for me may not work for you. Or it may work for your best friend, but it doesn't work for, right? And we get really caught up in what is everybody else doing? What should I be doing? And I want you to stop shoulding on yourself and just start doing the things that you want to do.
Right. I get that. What advice do you have for people, though, to recognize what is right for them? So I'm going to use myself as an example. I know that when I have more than 5 hours of phone calls in a day, I want to shoot somebody. My ideal is to have no more than 4 hours worth of calls in a day, because by the time I respond to some of the other needs that I have in the business, if I have more than 4 hours a day, I end up feeling really depleted by the end of the day. And so my goal is to always coordinate my schedule. I try to maximize time blocks so that I have full free days to focus on project work and deep thinking work and play, things like that.
Yeah.
And so that's me. But do you have any recommendations for people on how to actually recognize
Mhm.
how much time is too much or not enough. Because I think sometimes people give themselves 15 minutes to clean out an inbox with 100 emails, and then they leave frustrated because they didn't give themselves enough time.
Right.
Or,
Mhm.
Someone like me, I'll be coaching for 8 hours in a day and wonder why I hate my business. And it's really just because it was too much time, right? So how do
Yeah.
you help people? What advice do you have for people to actually self-diagnose the best way to spend their time?
Yeah. Well, I think the best way to really self-diagnose is doing a reflection at the end of the day, right? How do I feel? I walk through in the joy of missing out. I walk through, how to structure your weeks is one of the chapters. And the fifth thing that we talk about, the fifth P in the 5 Ps, is to propel. And it's this exercise that takes 5 minutes for you to do. The first minute you spend writing down the things that you actually accomplished, because I think a lot of times we forget all the good we've done and we think about all the things we didn't do, right? So you spend 1 minute just writing those down so you can go, okay, kind of like your backpack. I have a lot more things than I realized, right? You spend 1 minute assessing how you felt for the day. Did I put too much on my plate? Am I feeling weighed down? Did I feel stressed out? What felt good today? What didn't feel good? Minute 3 is on, how did I work today towards a goal? Minute 4 is on gratitude. And minute 5 is getting things out of your head and onto the page of what you'd like to maybe accomplish tomorrow, right? So that way you can close that work compartment, get into your home compartment. I talk about how you write it down, you put it on a sheet of paper, and you pop it right to where you're going to be processing your day the following day. So you use that as your springboard. But that, what did I say? The second minute where you stop and you go, how did I feel today? Really start to take inventory. How do I feel? Well, today I had 7 phone calls and I felt exhausted and I felt like I hated my business. Let's not do that again. Really start writing those things down and even keeping like a little logbook, right? Of what feels good, what doesn't feel good. On this day, I felt amazing. What did I do today? Don't just say, wow, today was great. Let's stop and assess what felt great. Same thing if today felt terrible. Today felt exhausting. I felt stressed out. Stop and let's do a quick assessment. And you'll start to recognize your own patterns. We all have an ultradian rhythm, which is that pattern of, peak time that we can work. It peaks up and then it dips down below, and then we need a break. And that's a time for our brain to get a little bit of rest and renewal. And it's a little bit different for everybody. It's pretty close to the same, range, but starting to pay attention to, what, Monday mornings are my morning where I'm super creative, right? So let's save creative work for Monday morning. Let's not use that for meetings, right? And just really start paying attention to how do I feel each day? Or this block felt incredible. Why did it feel incredible? And then you can start to customize your time for you. So again, it's not the ratios. It's like, what I discovered? Mondays are not the best day for me to have a bunch of meetings. So don't have meetings on Monday. Mondays are a day where I wake up and I'm fired up about what I do. So that's a creative day. Don't plan a single meeting or phone call for that day. Really honor that time for yourself. But we don't honor that time mostly because we don't pay attention to it. And we feel like, oh, who has time to write that kind of thing down? Just has to be scribbled notes. Right. And then at the end of the week, kind of take an assessment. How did this week feel? Okay, I noticed these things. Let's keep tracking it until you can start to really map out. I know when my peak creative times are. I know when my best blocks are for meetings because I've paid attention to how I feel. Again, going back to that emotional and part of us. How do I feel? I don't want to feel exhausted. I don't want to feel depleted. Right. So for you, there's never a reason to have more than 4 phone calls in a day. Like that needs to be an absolute boundary for you, that there is no reason why we get to 5. And if there's a reason why it has to get to 5, then you need to figure out some way to fix that, right? Because we want to prevent that from happening. And your team, their job is to hold that boundary for you, right? Not to push back on that boundary. That's an absolute boundary for you. Because the last thing we want, Lisa, is for you to feel like you hate your job. The last thing we need for you is to feel depleted at the end of the day, because you're going to show up for work the next day feeling depleted already because you're exhausted, right? So it's really important to pay attention to how do I feel personally, and then communicate that to your team and make sure that that is a very clear boundary that we're setting. This is my creative block. No bones about it. I'm not doing an interview. I'm not doing, a phone call. Absolutely not, unless it's Oprah. And then we'll make an exception, right? So it really is about tuning into who you are and your body.
So taking the time to really pay attention to whatever.
And it doesn't have to take long.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that exercise I just walked you through is 5 minutes. You spend 1 minute just assessing, how did today feel? What felt good? What didn't feel good?
And do
You
you do
can
that
gift
every
yourself.
day?
I do. 5 minutes. I mean, like, I don't have 5 minutes to gift myself at the end of the day. If I don't have 5 minutes to gift myself, I can't expect anybody else to give me 5 minutes. That's for me, right?
And what do you do to start your day?
So to start my day, I go through and I look at my sheet of paper from the day before. I read over what I accomplished yesterday. So I start the day like, wow, yesterday was pretty amazing. Look at all I got done. I focus in on, how I felt. So I'm like, okay, I need to adjust that. I want to make sure I want to make these changes or whatever. I look at what I was grateful for yesterday. So that builds in automatic gratitude in the morning, how I work towards a goal, which builds me my momentum. And I look at what I put at the bottom, which is, what I'm hoping to accomplish for today. And that gives me a little bit of water from my well to figure out, okay, here's what I'm going to plan for today. It literally takes 5 minutes for yourself to really build in a following day that feels good, that feels nurturing, that feels nourishing to you. I think that's really what's important.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. Good advice. Um, how did you write this book? You said you did nine edits or 9 revisions, like you went through it. I'm curious, as someone who aspires to be an author who has a hard time sticking with writing. You wrote something in the book about sometimes sitting on the porch with a pen and staring off into space with a pen and a notebook is working on the book. So I'm curious as to how you allowed yourself the creative space to really map out what you wanted to write about when it came to this project.
I think one of the big things that I do that's different from a lot of people is I don't set word count goals for each day. Like, people get really caught up in the word count goals. You have to write 200 words a day, or 200 is not very many. I have to write, 1,000 words a day or whatever it is. And there are some days where just nothing's going on the paper. And some days you just need to be able to have that space to think and really map things out to, again, get that forced view of what it is. When I'm introducing a concept like the impact framework, I have to come up with what's the word impact, and then what do each of those letters stand for. I need time just to kind of explore and kind of write things down and map things out and throw away pieces of paper or write the F word 5,000 times on the sheet and then delete it. That happens too sometimes. So for me, I have a word count goal of what I want for each chapter. And that gives me a container. Basically, like, my word count goal, I think for each chapter, I'd have to look, was about 5,500 words in each chapter. I know the book has to be between 55,000 and 65,000 words. So I figure out how many I want for the introduction and conclusion, and then I just divide it. So the chapters are pretty evenly spaced. What that word count goal does is it really helps me laser in, because I'll start talking about something that I think is really important. And I'm like, oh crap, I'm already 3,000 words in. So either I need to scale this back, or I need to, choose, because I have a list of like this many things that are going in the chapter. What's most important to go in next, right? And then I start plugging it in. So that's the only place where I have word count goals, is just about how long I want each chapter to be. And that's an average. It's not an exact. But for me, it really is not giving myself a very tight constraint of, I have to get this done in a week. I have to get this chapter done in a week. I have it loosely mapped out of what I want to accomplish, but it's like, okay, chapter 1, I want to have done by this date, ideally. But I also know that if I need to give myself the grace, I've got 3 extra days built in. Right. And so that way I can shift those timelines a little bit.
And do you write from beginning to end, or do you just do you work on different chapters at different times? Like, I'm assuming you create the framework. Like, do you start at the beginning, or what do you do?
The introduction is the very last thing I write. So I start with chapter 1. And I work my way through.
Read, by the way.
Oh, thank you. That note to the reader was really important to me. Like, I really wanted to set a tone for the book. And so that was why it was really important to me. I wrote that when I wrote the introduction and how this book works, because the thing is with an introduction is you're basically telling people like, this is what the book is going to be about. And you're enticing them and getting them interested. I don't know what the book is going to be about until after I have finished it, right? Because there are times where I have an idea of where a chapter is going to go. And then like the impact framework, for example, when I first mapped everything out, I thought I was going to talk about SMART goals. And I had a conversation with John where he was like, why are you talking about SMART goals? And I said, well, because, I've taught SMART goals 5 billion times. And he goes, but every time you're adjusting them, every time you're telling people that this part doesn't work or this needs to shift. And I was like, that's a really good point. Right. And so all of a sudden it became, okay, if I'm going to do a new framework, how's it going to work? What does that need to look like? Right. So again, there's that pushback that I'm getting from him, which is one of the things that I love about him. But I don't know what the book is going to be about, so I can't write that to the very end. And I think the introduction is so important because it sets the stage for everything else. But I do write chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, partially because, again, that whole idea of curriculum, I'll have callbacks in chapter 5 to something we talked about in chapter 2. Or I'll have a callback in chapter 7 to something we talked about in chapter 4 and chapter 1, right? So I have it kind of mapped out so that it's continually creating that thread. And I can only do that by writing in a linear fashion, one through the end, through the conclusion, and then back to the introduction. That's not to say that I don't go back and say, like for chapter 2, I had a section there that I'd written, and then I got to chapter 7 and I'm like, dang, I think that really fits better at chapter 7. So then I go and I steal from chapter 2 and pop it into chapter 7. And then I know I need to go back and fill in chapter 2. So that happens too. But I like to write linearly because part of it is the journey I'm taking people on. It's all about that journey for them.
And what about like your notes at the back? Like you have all the resources where you have, referenced other people's work. As an example, it's funny because as I was reading through the book, I was like, oh, this is because I've read so many books. I recognize some of the things that you wrote. And when I was reading the book when I was reading some of the stuff, I was like, oh, that's from so-and-so. And I didn't realize till I got to the end of the book that you had, the references to everything at the back of the book. So how do you organize that when you're writing? Like, how do you organize that right now for your next book? Are you capturing stuff like that in some way? You're like, oh, this is really good. I may want to reference this in a book down the road.
So I, first of all, I use Pocket, which is an app. So anytime I'm reading an article or something like that I think is going to apply for an upcoming book, I will add it to my Pocket. And that way, all my articles that I think are related to this book are together. That way I can reference them later on. I also have a really specific way of, this is going to super nerd me. Okay. When I read a book, especially business books, I love to underline. Like I am a book I like to write in books. I like to dog ear pages. What I do after I read a book is and to me as an author, that just makes me so happy. Like I'm like,
see all the stuff I have written in your book. There's tons of stuff written in your book. There's like stuff here. Ask Tanya if I can reference this in my book. Like seriously, you should see it. I should send you my notes from your book when I'm done.
I would love that. I really would, because truly that's why you write a book, because you want people to connect with it, right? And that shows that connection. But what I do is I underline things and I dog ear pages or I flag pages. And then afterwards I will go back through the book and I will type out some of those things. Or, Charles Duhigg talks about this concept, go back to page such and such. And so I have all of these searchable documents that I can go back and I'm like, oh, I know Simon Sinek said something on this. I'll go, and I'll go back through there. And when I'm doing all of my gathering of ideas, I print those out and I'll highlight the ones that I think apply, because I think it's really important. We're all kind of borrowing from each other's ideas. It's like, James Clear talks about habit stacking. So there's a note in the back that's like, James Clear talks about this, right? Or the yawning that I talk about in the introduction is, you'll see I even put a note that even though it's not a pulled quote from Malcolm Gladwell, it was inspired by Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point. Right. Where I have a note in Tipping Point where I'm like, I like how he talked about yawns, go back and kind of see how he did that. So I make sure to put that note in there because I want people to know I've I've gotten inspired by other places, right?
Right.
So that way I have all these notes to gather from, and I also use pockets. So I'm gathering those. And as I'm writing, if I'm pulling something from a source, I go ahead and I write the word source in parentheses, and I add the link directly to the source. That way I'm not worrying about writing out all of the, and really that's one of the things that HarperCollins does for you is you just give them the links. They do the, the bibliography or the notes. But I'm keeping that consistent throughout as I'm gathering ideas. I put those in there so I know where I've gotten it from. So I really do my best not to miss any of the notes. I'm also one of those nerds who, when I'm reading a book, I'm like, ooh, let me see if there's a note, because I want to go further into this research, or I want to read this study, or I want to. So I really appreciate when someone has really well done notes. So it's important to me.
Yeah. And for me, it's funny. I guess I just haven't really thought about it that way before, because I've thought, oh, well, that's so-and-so. I can't say that. That's not my idea. Instead of doing what you've done, which is, why can't I use their idea and just give them attribution for the idea in terms of how I brought it in, which is why I, wrote, there's a spot in my book where I was like, ask Tanya if I could use this, so it's interesting.
I feel certain I'll say yes.
Yes, I feel certain you will too, but it was one of my notes as I was writing. Right. So it's cool. I want to ask you one last question as we wrap up. And that is, we're about to finish a new year, or we're about to finish a year and start a new year. So lots of people are planning their goals for the upcoming year. What is your best piece of advice for a strategy to revisit your goals so that at the end of the year, you feel happy with what you have accomplished?
So earlier I talked about that whole idea that I stop each quarter. So before the end of each quarter, a week or two before the end of the quarter, I stop, I do a reflection, and then I do projection of where I want to go in moving forward. I go ahead and I schedule those into my calendar now for the whole next year. So I have one already mapped out for, what would that be? March, one for June, right? So I already have those in like a doctor's appointment, so I don't miss them. But really doing like a quick check-in, and this is one of the things in the goal setting planners that we have with Inkwell Press, we have every month a check-in. So you're constantly checking in on how you're doing and progressing, because I think it's so important to stop and do that, that thing we talk about in chapter 9 of assessing. Okay, do I like where I am? Do I still want to work on this goal? Just because you started working on a goal doesn't mean you need to finish it, right? Because sometimes things change.
We don't have to be goal martyrs.
Right? We don't have to be goal martyrs. No, walk away from it. It's okay to walk away from it. And it gives you a chance to say, okay, this is what I want to do. So for me in my business, I use the goal setting matrix that I talk about in chapter 8, where I map it out with the areas of my business. So I map out one quarter of it at a time. And I have things loosely in there about, oh, I think I'm going to work on this in June. I probably think but I make it so it's flexible so I can move things around in there. But each quarter I sit down, I do my reflection. How did last quarter go? What do I think I need to focus in on? And then I map out, okay, here's really what I think my goals are for the next quarter and moving ahead. It might be a continuation of something that I started on last quarter. It might be something brand new. But it really is, reflection is an intentional pause in your regular schedule to just assess, how am I doing? How do I feel? What do I think I want to do? And then move forward. That's what's going to keep you on track. That is the one thing you can do to guarantee success, is doing these check-ins.
It sounds to me like you are very intentional about reflecting on a daily basis as well, that is part of your practice for really accomplishing the things that you want in life.
Yeah, it really is. I think I cannot stress enough how important it is to just stop and do a check-in, just with, how do I feel? What do I think? And even in meetings, I mean, my team knows I always end every meeting with thoughts, feelings, emotions. Does anybody have anything for me? Because I want it to be an open dialogue, right? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are your emotions you're experiencing? Are you stressed? Does this make you nervous? Does it, right? That's kind of like a little check-in with my team of reflection. Reflect back to me what you feel about what I've just presented to you. So reflection to me is so important because we have to be able to stop and really take a look at where we've been in order to really move forward and decide where we want to go in the future.
Yeah, I agree. Awesome. Tanya, thank you so much. Cass,
Yeah,
do you have any final
absolutely.
questions? I saw you.
I'm just sitting here listening to you speak about the whole process of writing this book, and I can't believe how much attention you have paid to every detail, and that is incredibly inspiring. I think my only question, and I've felt this way as I'm reading, is that I feel like I'm in a different place in my life than a lot of your readers. And although everything that you're saying does 100% apply to me, I keep feeling like as a 20-something-year-old, I don't even know who I am yet, or what I want, or what my cathedrals actually are. I feel like there's 30 of them and I don't know what direction to go. And I think I get tripped up about that. And then I don't feel like I am living fully on purpose because there is so much uncertainty. So I guess, do you have any advice, or if you think back to yourself when you were my age, I'm 25, what do you wish you knew then? Or what do you want to tell me, basically?
Yeah, I would say to you, it's okay not to know. That you don't have to know, and you don't have to have it all figured out. I mean, honestly, when I was 25 years old, I was teaching school. I was about to meet my husband, I believe, or about to get married. And I thought I would teach school and then I'd be a stay-at-home mom. Boy, that couldn't be more different from the truth, right? I mean, this is the thing, is we get going with life and things shift and change. So it's okay that you have 30 cathedrals. I would say choose one. You can use that pie activity to really kind of hone in on one. But if you need to get rid of that cathedral, that's okay. Your cathedral can change. Just because you've decided something is your cathedral doesn't mean that this is the end all be all for the rest of your life. I mean, if I was doing that, then I would not be an author. I would not be a business owner. I would be a stay-at-home mom, right? Because it's so vastly different from where I thought I was going to be. And the not knowing is okay. Really embracing that whole idea of not knowing being a gift. I think so often we look at that as this is a problem for us, or that we're supposed to know everything, or we're supposed to have it all figured out. I didn't start Inkwell Press Productivity Coach until I was 40 years old. And I love what I do, but I didn't even know that was in the cards at all for me when I was your age. So isn't life amazing how it just unfolds for us? So allow it to unfold. Allow the experience of life to happen with you, right? Not to you, but with you. You're constantly changing and evolving, and that is an incredible, beautiful thing, and that I think we should all be embracing. Does that help?
Absolutely, it does. I like that a lot, especially the idea that not knowing, or not knowing what is to come is not a bad thing, and not having it figured out isn't a bad thing, but rather I need to look at it more like there are so many opportunities, and that is exciting.
Right. And plus you're already committed to me for life. So
Lisa's like, hold on a minute.
I did for this.
Cass, I know what your cathedral is. It is me.
We're in this together, girl. All right, Tanya, thank you so much. It was wonderful to have you here. I can't wait to see you in February in Miami. I hope you will be there.
Yes, I will be there. I can't wait to see you.
Yeah, I can't wait to see you and give you a hug. And I just really appreciate how generous you were with your expertise and your time, both here and earlier on my podcast. So thank you so much. And thank you for writing a really amazing book. I loved it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Honestly, this is why we write the books, right? This is why I am so intentional with it. I want to have deeper conversations. I want people to resonate with it. I want people to see that the extraordinary life is within reach, and it's absolutely a choice. So it's an honor to get to, be here with you. And I have to be honest, like the notes you've been sending me about how much the writing has meant to you means a lot to me, just because I respect you so much. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It's a great book. All right, ladies, I'm going to let you go. Have a great rest of your day. Merry Christmas, Tanya. And for those of you watching this, I hope you get extreme value from everything that we talked about. I feel like I just got a personal coaching session. It's great. Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.